All right, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here. My name is Nicholas. I'm a water quality engineer with DEQ Grant and Loan Program. Also joining me today is Alicia, Grant and Loan Analyst, and works in the same program with me with DEQ. So today we're going to talk about the new SRF Customer Handbook that we are currently rolling out, and it's currently in public comment. So the intent of our presentation today is to talk a little bit about the what and the why, and also solicit your feedback, questions, and comments during this presentation. A couple of just kind of housekeeping items. This is being recorded and will be available online if you'd like to watch it at a later time. Also, we will have a time for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those and provide a time at the end to answer some of those questions. So with that, let's get going here. First, just kind of a quick look at agenda. We're going to look at a few items here. It should be a pretty quick presentation with plenty of time for questions. Talk a little bit about the public comment period that's currently underway. We'll talk a little bit about background and objectives of this project. We'll then do some looks at the customer handbook, kind of a high-level look at the customer handbook itself, and then also have time for questions. And so that's kind of where we're headed today, and we'll go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing, wanted, dead or alive, public comments. We are currently in the public comment period until June 3rd for the customer handbook. So you can go to our website, and if you're on this presentation, you probably have been, and you can submit public comments on the website. You can find the handbook, the draft handbook there to take a look at, review. Again, those public comments will be taken up until June 3rd. So we're looking forward to soliciting your feedback and getting your thoughts on how to make this project successful. So with that, we want to talk a little bit about the background and objectives. So if you're familiar with the DEQ Grant and Loan Program, we've got drinking water, wastewater grants, drinking water and wastewater construction loans, and each one of those projects have their own handbook. And so currently, right now we have 4 handbooks. We've got the handbook for drinking water planning grants, a handbook for wastewater planning grants. We've got a handbook for drinking water loans, and we have a handbook for clean water, or also known as wastewater loans as well. They're great resources. They have a lot of information. They're also a little outdated, and there's some issues with them that we were aware of. And so about a little less than a year ago, we sat down and started looking at these handbooks and trying to wrap our minds around how do we update these, how do we make these maybe more useful, more clear for the people that use them. And so as we kind of started to dig into this, what we began to see is we really needed more than just an update, but we really needed a total revamp. And so that's really, as we started to imagine this and try to wrap our minds around this, really where it led us to was not just updating these 4 handbooks, but totally revamping them into a single, what we call customer handbook, what we're calling the SRF Customer Handbook. There's a lot of overlap between these programs. That was one of the things that we identified, was a lot of the processes, even a lot of the content and the information itself is very similar between these 4 handbooks. And so the idea really came to the front. It really emerged that it would really be best suited to have a single customer handbook where we could point people for all of these different grants and loans. And so that's kind of what developed. That's what took place as we began to move towards this idea, this concept of a single customer handbook. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how we developed that and what that looked like. As we began kind of diving in deeper into this customer handbook, this single guidance document, there was kind of 3 objectives that kind of emerged as really important to us. And the first one that we really wanted to tackle was the intended audience component of the existing 4 handbooks. Was a little bit challenging. There was times in the existing handbooks where they would be speaking towards a recipient or somebody looking to obtain funding from DEQ, and then it would maybe the audience might switch to DEQ implementation or policy, and then it might switch back to maybe say a consulting engineer working for a recipient, and it would kind of hopscotch back and forth between different audiences. And so one of the things we really wanted to do is create this customer handbook, as the name indicates, that is really focused on you as the interested recipient, or as the consultant, the client to DEQ funding. We really wanted to focus on what do you need to make an SRF grant and loan project successful, and really focus on those things in this handbook, and the things that maybe are more specific to DEQ or federal agencies. We can pull those out into a place where we can access, DEQ can access those, but we won't bog down the handbook for the intended audience. And so that was one of the driving objectives, was really to kind of streamline the intended audience and make sure that we were providing you as the customer with the information that you needed to make your project successful, and to understand what DEQ needs from you. The second thing, and again, these objectives are all kind of interrelated, and there's definitely some overlap with them. The second objective that we really focused on was we really wanted to make this handbook clear and concise. The existing 4 handbooks, again, they had a lot of great information, but they had kind of evolved over time into something that wasn't always easy to find information. It was kind of a piecemeal thing that evolved, and what we wanted to try to capture in this handbook was a very linear, sequential process, where you could understand the whole process if you need to, but also go to the exact parts and pieces of your project quickly to be able to find the information you need to implement your project. And so we really tried to focus on this idea of a clear and concise document. You'll see it's not lengthy. It's only about 30 pages, which is on the small side, believe it or not, for most DEQ guidances. And so we really did that intentionally. We didn't want this to bleed on to a lot of pages with unnecessary information. But at the same time, we want to provide the amount of detail that made implementing a grant and loan project, obtaining funding, very clear, so that the expectations were very clear for what DEQ needs of you when you're implementing these projects. So that was a major driver for us that we attempted to take on with this project. The last objective that drove this process, we've kind of already alluded to, is this idea of kind of a one-stop resource. So this has to do with, again, like we talked about, combining the 4 handbooks into a single handbook. As an example, the existing 4 handbooks, they had about a little over 90 attachments, forms, checklists. And we were able to go from about 90 down to about 20 attachments. So we were able to significantly condense the amount of attachments, just because, of one, the overlap that was present between the 4 handbooks. We were able to condense those attachments, checklists, and forms. But also, we were really able to look at these attachments and checklists and really say, okay, what is really absolutely necessary for the intended audience to be able to move a project forward, to obtain grant and loan funding and move that project forward. And so we were able to further reduce those checklists based on those criteria. So again, those were kind of the objectives that drove this project forward. We're excited. I think it's going to be a great resource, hopefully. As you know, probably know, if you don't know, it looks like the SRF program with DEQ is going to continue to receive additional funding through various federal sources and state sources, and so we're excited to try to streamline the process, make it quicker internally, make it better internally, but also hopefully pass that efficiency and streamlining onto you as the client through this customer handbook. So we're excited. All right, so we're going to move a little bit into a quick look at this draft customer handbook. We won't go into detail, but we'll just kind of take a quick high-level view of it, skim through it, and then we can definitely answer questions if anybody has any. All right, so quick look at the table of contents here of the handbook. The first thing that I'll just kind of bring to your attention is we have a page that's devoted to contact information. This is really intended if you don't know who to talk to for specific grant and loan funding topics. This is intended to try to direct you to the appropriate person and be a resource for you to make sure you're talking to the right person right off the bat. Again, we understand that staff changes, people move around sometimes, and so this is hopefully we're going to try to keep this updated, this contact list updated here within the handbook, which kind of ties into the table of contents above the revision log. We do anticipate that there will be updates to this handbook. We intend to keep it up to date and identify those updates and revisions in that revision log as time goes on. The next item to kind of look at, bring your attention to, is the list of attachments. Again, we kind of mentioned this already of going from the 90 plus attachments down to about 20. This is really kind of that one-stop shop resource where you would probably want to go to get those various in-depth guidance documents. You can see there's also some forms that are pretty important, like the application forms, reimbursement request forms. Those are things that you're probably going to be accessing frequently if you're applying for or have DEQ grant and loan funding. Down the list, you can see there's state environmental review process forms. If you get a planning grant or a construction loan, you'll be working through some of those processes. And then we have the engineering resources, which are kind of where the rubber hits the road for some of these projects. We've got some checklists, a specification insert that's really important, and some various certification documents and guidance documents to take a look through. Again, this is something that we would anticipate would be kind of a quick list of attachments that you can go to right off the bat if you're looking for something, but you don't necessarily want to go through the entire document to find a resource or a attachment. So this is up front for your convenience, so you can scroll right to it, click on what you need, and you're off to the races. And moving down the table of contents takes us into the introduction, section 1. So we have a few pages here that's really intended to capture the background information, especially if you're new or curious to the SRF grant and loan program, DEQ's grant and loan program. This is where you'd probably want to start. Again, not a lot of information here, not a long read. There's just a kind of 2 or 3 pages of background information, things like funding opportunities, eligibility, who's eligible, are you eligible, are you what costs are eligible, what are some of the general funding requirements. Not real in-depth information, but it just kind of provides some background information. If you're new to the SRF program, don't know much about it, this is a really quick way to kind of get your feet underneath you and decide whether or not you're interested in funding and what the future might look like for you with the SRF program. Which then takes us to section 2, which is really all about the funding process. So if you're interested in DEQ's grant and loan program, how do you get on the list? How do you get grants and loans? How do you move from being interested to being part of the process? And so this is really intended to kind of walk through from step 1 all the way through from being interested in it to actually having secured DEQ grant and loan funding. These are things like the letter of interest process. So the overview. These are things like selecting an engineer. You will need an Idaho licensed engineer to move these projects forward. And once, if you are on the fundable list, actually submitting a grant application or a loan application moving through that process again from being interested to actually securing funding is kind of what this goes through. Again, not a lot here, a couple pages that will take you kind of from the start to the finish, which moves us into the next section, section 3, which would be project implementation. This is kind of where the rubber hits the road. After you've secured DEQ, grant or loan funding, kind of the what now? Where do we go from here? So this is going to talk about things like planning grants, the environmental review, construction loans, and reimbursement requests. And it's really intended to really kind of guide you from step 1, 2, 3, all the way through the process of these various projects. It's also really important to note that just because you have a grant or loan with DEQ, you still need to be able to submit reimbursement requests to get the disbursements for the project, for the ongoing project. As it's happening, DEQ will reimburse you for the project. And so this is where you're going to find all that information. Construction loans under section 3.3 are also, there's a lot of information in there. Construction loans tend to be a little bit more complex. There's more requirements, more moving parts. They're longer. They usually take a longer amount of time, more people involved. And so there's a lot more information in there on what that might look like. And so dive into that in the document itself, and let us know if you have any questions or comments on that. All right, moving on to section 4. So this is once you've kind of moved through the project and you're getting near to completion. This is section 4 is really what to expect for closing out a grant or a loan. What steps you need to take, what steps DEQ will take to kind of give a common operating picture for crossing the finish line. There's also some discussion there about loan repayments, what to expect there, and some record keeping and accounting that will be required for grant and loans. Section 5, not a lot there currently, but there's a few guidance materials regarding some of DEQ's policies and some reference material. And then last but not least, there is a glossary in case any of the terms entirely confuse you. So that's kind of a quick look through the whole document. Obviously, didn't really get into the details, but just kind of gives you an idea of some of the thought behind the process and what that looks like. So with that, we will kind of move quickly to next steps. And so obviously, public comment period is about halfway through. We intend after June 3rd, we intend to take your comments, address those comments, consider those comments, next we would make any revisions to the handbook. We'd finalize the handbook with the hope to go live in July of 2022 of this summer. We fully realize that there's going to be a bit of a transition period going from the old 4 handbooks and their attachments to the new single handbook and the attachments. So we anticipate there's going to be some folks that maybe missed the memo and are using the old handbooks and are confused as to why we're asking them to use the new handbook. But we are going to try to, as best as we can, direct folks to use the new handbook, and we'll certainly provide some transitional grace period as we move into that. So it all makes sense in theory, right? It works perfectly in theory, but we understand when the rubber hits the road, sometimes things don't work exactly like what we think it should. So we're certainly open to your comments. Hopeful that you'll provide comments back to us on why this might not work, or even more than that, things that we could do better to make this work better. If you have any ideas, we're certainly open to that, and that's why we're doing the public comment period. We also have our contact information down below here. You can reach out to myself or Alicia directly with any public comments that you might have, any ideas. There's the link here to the public comment page at DEQ's website. You can go there and grab the handbook, submit comments there as well, whatever works best for you. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. Alicia, do we have any Any written questions?
Nope, I'm not seeing any in the chat, but we can certainly stand by if anybody has any questions to add.
Awesome.
And I've
So
also have allowed if anybody wants to be unmuted as well.
perfect. Any questions from the live audience? Going once, going twice. Fantastic. So either we explained it perfectly or we thoroughly confused everyone. Either way, thank you everybody for your time. And again, if you have any follow-up questions that pop up as you're looking through this, feel free to reach out to myself or Alicia, and we can help you out. So thank you everyone for your time, and we'll talk to you later.